Hi, I'm Verity Abel and I'm a freshman at Duke University. I was born in England in 1996, moved to France in 1998, and then landed in the United States in 1999. Needless to say, the first 3 years of my life were busy ones. When I think about what has defined me as a person and what has characterized my life in a nutshell, the first thing I would say would not be my cultural background. The number one thing that has shaped my life from almost the very beginning is my swimming. It has played an absolutely fundamental role in my life, and I'd like to explore the path it has taken me on, the values and skills it has given me, and the way in which it has made me who I am today. Moving to the United States was somewhat of a blessing in disguise for me. I wouldn't have known what opportunities I would have missed had I never moved away from England. But living in the United States now, and knowing my parents' perspective on childhood and upbringing in the UK, has made me appreciate the fact that my life was planted here. I figured that I would share some of my parents' perspective, considering they have experienced and lived both cultures to a greater degree than I have, and they are able to recognize the differences in their childhoods in England compared to mine in the United States.
We came to the States in 1999. Verity was 3, her brothers were 7 and 5 respectively. And one of the things that was apparent in the US that was not the case so much in the UK was the importance of sport as a component of a full individual. The British approach seemed to be much more about the academics, and you did sport because it was a good thing to do, but it wasn't necessarily a description of your capabilities. In the States, finding a sport and being good at a sport seemed to be one element of a full person, and in particular,
part of the advantage of living in the United States, where the culture is more promoting of athletics and extracurricular activities, was the fact that I, as well as my brothers, were able to experience and try out many different sports and hobbies. I attribute much of my initial interest in swimming to my parents, who had me in the water from a very young age and who involved me in the aquatic activities available to us.
For all of them, they were in the pool at a very young age, well under a year old, in a kind of mother and baby type of environment where you could hardly call it swimming for them, but at least they were in the pool, becoming, acclimated to how it felt to be in a pool. And she started out at the YMCA. We were fortunate enough to have a fantastic, swimming program from the very early, just straightforward swim lessons to a competitive swim team right here on our doorstep. And Verity started, I think this is a funny anecdote. She started in a swim class, and let's say it was called Sharks and Minnows, something of that nature, and she was 5 years old, and she could already swim. We'd taught her to swim, and she was swimming after a fashion, but we wanted her to, learn the strokes and improve. So we signed her up for this class, and at the end of, I think, about the second lesson, I was called in by the swim instructor, who said to me, she's trying to do butterfly while the others are doing doggy paddle, so I think you might want to see if you can sign her up for the swim team. So she did in fact join the competitive team, and she was just shy of 6 years old.
Although swimming was the first sport I became involved with, I've been fortunate enough to try out many other sports, including soccer, field hockey, tennis, volleyball, water polo, gymnastics, and ballet. Most of those were relatively short-lived, otherwise I would be one of the most multi-talented human beings ever. The one sport I actually did continue with the same intensity as swimming was dance, and it got to the point where I really had to make a decision.
Verity also did ballet growing up, and was quite committed to ballet as well as equally to that as to swimming until she was about 10 years old. And then it was really the ballet school that forced the hand on that, because they wanted her to, attend lessons, I think 4 or 5 times a week, and ultimately join the ballet company. And of course her swim schedule wouldn't allow that. So from a very young age, 10 or 11, she had to sit down and make that decision,
right.
which one was she going to give up. So there was this specialization occurring from a really young age.
I felt like having to make this decision contributed to the number of skills I was able to learn from my life as a swimmer, because it forced me to take into account and analyze what I truly wanted.
a very mature way, she made her decision, I think by default, by saying that she didn't particularly want to give up the ballet, but she could never see herself not swimming. And that really made the decision for her.
This was a time when I really realized that swimming was a sport that piqued my interest more than any other activity. It was a sport in which I could work hard and in turn improve, with pretty much direct correlation as a child. We had a YMCA team right in my town, which was the one I joined when I was 5, and then we had an even better YMCA team in the neighboring town only a few more miles down the road, which I ended up joining at 12 years old. The availability of the training was invaluable to me, and my family as well, and it got to the point where I became very invested in it and felt lucky that I had a hobby I could do and was somewhat good at. As I progressed through middle school, I started to become more aware of the sacrifices I had to make by continuing to pursue swimming. It was little things like missing sleepover parties for practice in the morning, or a big one was being the only one in my class to miss the class trip to Washington, D.C. because I had a swim meet the same weekend. I felt concerned that the events and activities I was missing out on were detracting from my childhood and adolescence experience as a whole, and were making it difficult for me to fit in. Swimming became more serious for me in my freshman year when I joined my high school team in addition to my club team. This year was somewhat of a standout year for me as I progressed through the championship season. I mentioned earlier that I became more conscious of the sacrifices I had to make for swimming, and I use the word sacrifice because that is how I viewed it at the time. They were sacrifices to me because they were experiences I felt like I was losing that would have contributed to a wholesome childhood. Now that I'm older, I realize sacrifice is not the right word, because I made the decision to choose swimming over other things, as it was and still often is more important. Yes, I may have been giving up things with short-lasting benefits, but I've gained so much more in return that has made me truly understand the meaning of sacrifice. I don't regret any of the choices I made growing up because I may have not ended up where I am today. It was in high school that I became more and more comfortable with who I was and learned to appreciate the path my life had taken up to that point and the direction it was heading in. This was the time where I realized that swimming was in a way the key thing that defined me, and I was absolutely content with that. While I did feel somewhat set apart from the rest of my peers in school due to the differences in our schedules and everyday lives, I learned how to function as an individual and as a member of a team. I learned what it means to be committed and dedicated to something you care about, and I learned that no success comes without true effort. I find myself now at Duke, which is one of only 2 schools in the country ranked in the top 10 for both athletics and academics. I grew up feeling like I had 2 lives that were kept separate from each other, but here I go to school at the same place where I swim. My teammates are also my classmates, my roommates, and my best friends. Swimming gave me a pathway to finding colleges where I'd feel most comfortable being myself, and by extension, living in the United States gave me the opportunity to swim. So I feel very fortunate in the way my life turned out in terms of my family immigrating to the US and introducing me to a swim team. I feel lucky that I was given the chances to make lifelong friends through club swimming and have a community I can relate to outside of my school environment. I'm grateful for the course I've taken thus far, given to me by my parents and my brothers, coaches and friends, as it has landed me in a place where I'm comfortable and proud of what I do and who I am. Sky.